Welcome everyone, Questine here with my essential guide to Khorne for Total War Warhammer 3 Immortal Empires. At first glance, with regards to Khorne, you might think that it's just a big dumb race that is all about killing people, smashing stuff up. And certainly, you can play Khorne in such a way, but you also have many other possibilities. How many other possibilities? Well, you can build a massive network of alliances, even with the Orthertide faction. It is a bit ridiculous. See, Khorne is not just a god of brutality, he is the god of war, god of strategy, god of diplomacy, funnily enough, in a lot of different ways. It's kind of hilarious when you think about the fact that Khorne can have more diplomatic viability than even the Empire. Yeah, that's a bit freaking hilarious. It comes down to a couple of factors. One of the more significant factors has to do with the fact that Khorne does have diplomatic vassalization, which does open up a whole list of possibilities, especially with distant declarations of war. Just declare war on a faction, and while they're getting beat up by other factions, you can even vassalize them like I did over here for Grom. You can manipulate the campaign map in your favor, and by the way, this army is completely ridiculous. I'm not sure exactly what Grom's been eating, but I don't think I've seen the AI build so many bolt throwers ever before. Dwarves, greenskins, it doesn't matter. It is a bit absurd, isn't it? In quite a lot of ways. I suspect his settlement was sacked, and that's the reason he built those, because he didn't have other unit recruitment structures, and, well, it was either that or squigs or goblins. I guess Grom decided, well, it's better a bolt thrower than to get a bunch of squigs. He might have been wrong on that subject. But regardless, there are a whole lot of possibilities. What I do need to talk about, though, is whether or not you need to own the DLC to have a great campaign experience with Khorne. I would recommend it. I would recommend getting Champions of Chaos. I would recommend getting Omens of Destruction, but it is not inherently necessary to have a really good experience if you're looking to play a Khorne campaign. Whether or not you're playing Skarbrand or Arbol, though I'll be using footage from Skarbrand's campaign because Arbol does miss one of the features, which is Unholy Manifestations. Great campaign, great Legendary Lord, but he doesn't have that Unholy Manifestation, whereas Skarbrand and Skulltaker do have it. Out of the three Khorne campaigns, I would say that both Skarbrand and Arbol are really, really good campaigns, whereas Skulltaker, not so much. It's not down to the faction necessarily, it's more down to Lustria. There are several settlements that are choke points in Lustria, and if you raise them, well, you may end up losing a significant amount of movement range or being stuck altogether, like this one over here, this one, this ninth corner of hell over here with the floating pyramid. Just so much time wasted, because if you raise a settlement, which you are certainly incentivized to do with Khorne, and you will be doing it throughout the course of your campaign, you may end up getting stuck as Skulltaker. And oh, look, Manfred is sending 2 full stacks against me. Whatever shall I do? Well, it's not necessarily a problem for the moment. So, this is what I've achieved in 25 turns. A network of alliances, a good amount of army variety for Skarbrand, and also another army over here. Yes, we have the real Green Tide. Greenskin, Skaven, Khorne. It's truly the end times if Archaon had recruited Grimgor on his side. Kind of a bit weird that the Forces of Order managed to convince Grimgor to fight for them. Regardless, let me just go over a campaign step by step, the things that you need to know. When you begin a Khorne campaign, be it Skarbrand, Skulltaker, or Arbol, what you're going to want to do is focus on getting as much growth as quickly as possible. And one of the key ways of getting growth in a province is, of course, to ensure that you control as many settlements as possible in that province, because settlements themselves add growth. So taking control of your initial province is a very substantial aspect in terms of growing your settlements. You also want to focus on the growth building very quickly, though don't sacrifice some of the unit recruitment or hero recruitment structures either. That is actually a very important thing to note. In terms of the settlements, though, Skarbrand and Skulltaker start with demonic settlements. Arbol starts with a mortal settlement. Mortal settlements are just flat better than demonic settlements. The reason behind that particular aspect is that, well, mortal settlements give you Chaos Warriors of Khorne at tier 1. Very durable unit, very good out-resolve result. And what is important to note about this is, like, if we look at, say, blood letters, yes, I probably should have done this in a bit of a different way, but if we auto-resolve this, for instance, you can see that the blood letters are taking significantly more damage. Now, in terms of actual combat ability in a battle, it is worth saying that blood letters early on are going to obliterate anything that you might be dealing with in a campaign in the very early game, unless they're being showered by ranged units. But that is a very different discussion altogether. Regardless, you do want to get the ball rolling as quickly as possible, and in point of fact, it might just actually be worth to do it in a similar way to what I've done just over here, because you might be able to use this army for movement range. See, Khorne has a particular ability on every single lord, be it legendary lords or regular lords from level 1. So if we recruit a blood speaker over here, you can see that that he also has the Blood God's Vigor. This is available from level 1. This replenishment replenishes 20% campaign movement range after winning a battle and replenishes 10% campaign movement range after raising a settlement. This obviously increases with various effects, but by default, you do have a fairly good amount of movement range. Now, the reason this movement range is so important doesn't even come down to the fact that pretty bad result there. But the benefit of that movement range right there is the fact that beyond just the fact that you're going to be able to move from settlement to settlement, one of the things you can do in a Khorne campaign is switch stances very easily, specifically to demonic portal stance, the encamp stance, if you will. And the benefit of that, of course, is just down to the fact that you will be able to move through territory much faster. I would not necessarily recommend looking at this video as a step-by-step guide on how you should play a Scarbrand campaign, but it's just something worth noting. Getting that movement range, going deep into enemy territory is a significant benefit. Beyond that, one of the things you can do with this movement range is you can move in march stance. Assuming you fight a battle, you do need to fight a battle in a turn. Sometimes it doesn't work, I don't exactly know, but most of the time it will work, allowing you to expend pretty much all your movement, or most of it. It's a bit crazy sometimes, but allowing you to spend most of your movement to get to a settlement. And then if you're right on top of a settlement, you can then switch to normal stance, not even a camp stance, normal stance, and then attack that settlement. So that way you can get the jump on factions that you're not at war with, being able to do a significant amount of damage and just keep the ball rolling. That is one of the major benefits with Khorne. So get mortal settlements, rely on the movement. You do want the Blood Reaper, but both Skulltaker and Scarbrand start with the Blood Reaper. Arbol doesn't, you'll have to get that, but you will want your provincial capital in your initial province to be a mortal one, and then use minor settlements initially, not later on, use minor settlements initially to get a Blood Reaper in an Arbol campaign. The reason you want to focus on mortal settlements comes down to the fact that, well, Chaos Warriors of Khorne and Chaos Warriors of Khorne with halberds, as well as cultists and exalted heroes, are all worth getting. So if you're starting as Scarbrand or Skulltaker, you'll start with Blood Reaper. You want to convert your initial settlement to a mortal one from turn 1. Yes, it will cost money. It's not free. It will cost money, but it's very much worth doing in a campaign. And you might also start with this building that allows you to recruit Cast Furies and Flesh Out. It's just not worth it. Like with the initial Blood Reaper or in Skulltaker's campaign recruiting the initial Blood Reaper, just get rid of that building, get something else. And you don't want to convert, it will take several turns. That is one of the downsides in a Scarbrand and Skulltaker campaign, and one of the reasons Arbol is better. You do want mortal units, you do want the heroes in particular, Cultists of Khorne especially, which are available even if you don't own any of the DLC. Exalted heroes, I believe, if I'm not mistaken, are tied to Champions of Chaos. So you may not care about this building, because certainly none of the units that you can recruit over here are worth it until tier 5 if you don't own the DLC. If you do own the DLC, Champions of Chaos specifically, you will want Chaos Knights of Khorne with lances. That charge bonus is freaking crazy. Combine that with Frenzy, these guys end up being ridiculous. I mean, you compare Cast Knights of Khorne to Cast Knights of Khorne with Lances, there isn't necessarily that much of a significant difference in stats in certain ways, but there is a significant difference in charge bonus, and you want to get these guys available. But you want to focus on infantry. Cast Warriors with dual weapons that you can get at tier 3, Cast Warriors with halberds at tier 2, maybe Forsaken of Khorne if you really want to, though I would not necessarily bother with the beasts themselves. Now, beyond that, research-wise, you want to get to Hateful to Die, get war leaders as quickly as possible, and extra cultist will come in very, very handy. You want to basically upgrade all the way to Reaper of Ages, maybe even a bit more if you want to, but then get Reaper of Ages, which will be done like anything that costs skulls in the research tree will be done in one single turn, so it's always worth getting Reaper of Ages after we've gotten war leaders, and then focus on the Way of Wrath, because that construction time of -1 turn for all buildings is going to be a fairly substantial advantage that you want to take advantage of. So growth, mortal units, heroes, that is what you want to focus on. Then you have the Skull Throne. You kind of want to use it as often as possible. One of the abilities you can use from the Skull Throne in every campaign that's going to help you out a lot in your initial battles, and I recommend fighting those manually. I mean, it's Khorne. It's a fairly easy army to understand by default, right? Hell, you can even right-click in many situations with your entire army and win. But I would recommend fighting battles manually, especially if you've got Bloodletters, which you started with, and the only units you can recruit as Scarbrand and Skulltaker. You want to fight those battles manually because of the result they have, but you want to use potentially Wound of the World. Keep in mind that every settlement you do take does cost 2,500 skulls. So you do start with enough to get 2 settlements, for instance, but if you're using Wound of the World and you're not getting enough skulls from battles, it might create some issues. But ideally, you want to get the Skull Throne as quickly as possible to as high of a level as you can, especially over here at tier 3, because this can replenish your entire faction leader's army movement range and replenish an entire faction leader's army. Obviously, cooldown, right? Global cooldown upon activation 3 turns. You won't be able to use these back to back, but still a very, very significant advantage. And now in the Scarbrand and Skulltaker campaign, you also have these Unholy manifestations. And since we have 3 Legendary Lords of Khorne as opposed to just 1, you are going to get a lot of global Khorne corruption happening in a campaign. And you should use these as often as you can. Realistically, in a campaign, most of the time, you're not going to get Slaughter Incarnate, or it's going to be a long-term thing, or Call of Battle, but you are going to start with Eternal War, and you're also going to get Khorne's Glare. These two are very significant, because Eternal War replenishes your movement. Recommend fighting that battle manually, very easy battle. Can give you some benefits, economic benefits, experience, etc. And then Khorne's Glare, very useful, especially when it comes to vassalization, because the way diplomatic vassalization works is you trade this element to another faction if it has barracks, and that might net you a vassalization agreement. Or you declare war on a faction, for instance. One of the ways you can get, like, the Crooked Moon Mutinous gets is declare war on them on turn 1, take few casualties in battle, so don't out-resolve the way I just did here, and they might be willing to vassalize for a peace agreement, or peace agreement combined with you declaring war on Skarsnik, and who doesn't want to declare war on Skarsnik anyway? To be fair, like, the whole Skarsnik meme, it's like, yeah, he's a good lord right now. One of the things to mention about these Unholy manifestations, though, is that you can get Khorne Ascendant as well for the Great Game every 8 turns or so. I'm not sure exactly what determines ascendancy, but what is important to know about ascendancy is it makes all Unholy manifestations stronger, and those stronger versions have their own cooldown. So basically, your cooldowns will reset every time Khorne is ascendant. That is a pretty damn substantial benefit. Or rather, the cooldown for, those separate cooldowns will kick in. So you can use Eternal War 1 turn before Ascendancy, and if you get the Khorne Ascendancy, it's kind of randomized. I'm not sure exactly what triggers it, but you can use Eternal War and then get another one. Or you can use a better one that gives you more movement range. Or you can get Khorne's Glare, which gives you not a Rune settlement, but a Tier 2 settlement. Very, very substantial level of power. Arbol doesn't have it. He does have his own gimmick, but still, Scarbrand has it, Skulltaker has it. is one of the core features of their campaigns. There's a reason I think Arbol is the best, one of the best campaigns in the game, and the best Khorne campaign. Just Immortal focus, really, with regards to that. So one of the things you want to do in a Khorne campaign is you want to take your initial province, as I said, but then you want to raise a couple of settlements because you will need the skulls. You'll want to get the skulls for the skull throne as quickly as possible. And this is where we got to talk about Khorne settlement taking. You don't need to take an entire province. The initial one you just want to because of the growth benefit. But other provinces, all you really need in those other provinces is to take a settlement. It doesn't matter if you sack it or not. That's not important. What is important, however, is that you take one settlement. It can be the last settlement you take, can be the first settlement you take in that province, but you take a settlement. And Khorne corruption gives you a chance that can be increased, but gives you a chance to automatically colonize ruins at the beginning of a turn. It's a bit of a questionable interaction in regards to Beastman corruption, but that's why we have Khorne's Glare, for instance, to deal with that situation. Though you may want to kill Malagor if you're playing Scarbranch. Pointing out, he might be a pain in the neck to deal with. Regardless, just taking a settlement may give you the entire province, assuming another faction is not moving quickly enough to take the settlement from you. So that is worth keeping in mind with regards to that. Another thing to be said about Khorne is with regards to cultists. See, one of the core campaign features for Khorne, all the legendary lords, is the fact that you can get these cultists of Khorne. And you want to get these, sorry, not these cultists of Khorne, that's an exalted hero. You want to get the cultist of Khorne. And a cultist of Khorne, what he can do is establish a cult. And cults are really, really sweet for Khorne in a campaign. But yeah, as you can see over here, for instance, I'm rebuilding the settlement, and at this turn over here, I used Khorne's Glare to get it. And I'm going to be able to sell it quick. I'm also going to be able to get a peace agreement with Morgheim, no problem. Sell it quick, get a vassalization agreement with him. Like, if I look at the diplomacy tab with regards to quick over here, I declared a bunch of wars. Like, factions will value you selling them a real settlement, not a ruined one. They'll value that more. They'll also value any barracks that you give them in that settlement. So either a mortal barracks or beast barracks, that's what you can get at tier 1. That is something a faction is going to value. And disorder factions, or chaos factions, including Skaven. Skaven are a chaos faction. But disorder factions, greenskins, for instance, Skaven, other chaos factions like Warriors of Chaos, even other demonic races, even Slaanesh, who Khorne hates, they will be willing to engage with you diplomatically and become your vassals much easier. The Order factions, less so. So just keep in mind some of the limitations. One of the important things to mention about this, though, is the fact that you do not want to make a defensive alliance or a military alliance with a faction that you're looking to vassalize, because it's going to make it harder to vassalize them. The reason behind that is that a faction is going to be willing to become your vassal if they're much weaker than you. But when you ally them, your strength, your faction strength diplomatically is going to get added to theirs. To be sure, you're not necessarily going to have the highest faction strength when you're playing a Khorne campaign, just because that's based on how many armies you have, and Khorne is not necessarily about having a lot of armies, but having a couple of really, really powerful armies. That's why it's so important to get vassals, because, yeah, it gives you more flexibility on the campaign map, besides the fun of being able to recruit different kinds of units. One of the key ways the Khorne economy works is through bloodletting. Especially on your legendary lord. Fight battles with lords, get bloodletting higher, don't let it decline by not fighting battles. This reduces your global recruitment duration, so you can recruit on the field very, very quickly. Especially if you combine this full-on bloodletting with a particular skull for the skull throne ability over here that reduces global recruitment duration by one turn. So you can get -3 turns, which means that the vast majority of units can be recruited in 1 turn. Hell, Arbol can recruit every unit in the Khorne roster, I think, in 1 turn, if he has that skull for that bread and bloodshed ability over here. Because he also has a global recruitment duration -1 inherently as a lord effect in his campaign beyond the bloodletting. Bloodletting is army based on the army itself. Each army has its own blooding. So one of the things you might benefit from is if you're playing a Khorne campaign, you might just want to recruit a lord once you take your initial settlement and just have him follow your legendary lord around to get their bloodletting up, or have them attack settlements. This can also be useful if you want to keep your legendary lord moving, but you also want to capture settlements, because you kind of don't want to stop in a Khorne campaign. Momentum is key. Get the ball rolling, never stop until someone puts a bullet in your head from the Empire, probably. And even then, that might not stop you. Now, with regards to cults, one of the things that cults can do that's extremely powerful, well, they give you a bunch of effects. Like, for instance, calls each time a battle is fought in the province, not just for you, though this can make things more difficult for enemy armies, dealing with enemy armies in province. But this is one of the things that's good about Khorne. You can actually set the level of difficulty that you're dealing with. I do hate leadership buffs to the enemy, though, I gotta admit on that subject. Though you can always remove this if you want to. I think so. That's not necessarily going to be a problem. But there's all kinds of effects, like Khorne corruption, replenishment, you know, reducing control in all provinces, but giving an extra blood host attrition immunity. Blood hosts, I find, are not necessarily worth investing in that much early on in a campaign. More so, I would say, later on in a campaign. Like, blood hosts, they can spawn with a bunch of units. You can actually increase the size of blood hosts for, like, Blood X and Hello. For instance, increasing the number of units. There's an entire research tab, or 2 research tabs that benefit blood hosts, right? So adding extra units or adding a good amount of combat power. But I do find focusing on blood hosts to be kind of redundant these days. And yes, this is the kind of army you want to focus on early on in a Khorne campaign, like a bunch of Chaos Warriors with axes and shields, and a bunch of Chaos Warriors of Khorne with halberds, and all 3 heroes, so Blood Reaper, Cultist of Khorne, Exalted Hero Khorne. I'll talk about those towards the end, about lords and heroes at the end of it. But regards to cults, the real power over here, well, you can declare war on a random faction in 2 turns. This will give you 5,000 gold and 1,000 skulls. Oh, sorry, 5,000 income. That's not really worth it. You might struggle with money early on in a Khorne campaign, but then after that, you'll be swimming in it. It's not worth it, especially given the sheer amount of diplomatic options you may have. Like, for instance, over here, I vassalized Queek, but not just Queek. I also declared war on turn 1 in this campaign on the Mutinous Gets, and then they surrendered and became my vassal. And Caracazol is going to have a really, really bad day. And I can sell, and because I took 1 settlement through Khorne's Glare, and Malagor destroyed the other one in Morkheim, the Khorne corruption kicked in, despite the Beastman situation, the Beastman ritual, the Khorne corruption kicked in, and I got the other settlement as well. I won't take the entire province, but I don't need it. By the way, rebellions happen pretty much never in a Khorne campaign. I don't think I've seen one since 6.0. Let me know what you guys think about that. But anyway, these cultists, they can set up a cult every 15 turns. But you don't need to keep the hero that set up a cult. Like, one of the things you can do is like, oh, you set up a cult, your job is done, let me just recruit another one and send them in the exact opposite way. And you can teleport your faction leader to a cult location. Another thing you can do is you can set up a Dark God's Choice over here. This will give you a Khorne cult magi at this location. It will destroy the building, not the cult. It will destroy the building, the cult will stay. And this can make for a special cult. Is it worth it? Kind of. I would say it's more of a long-term investment, but maybe. Like, that is a big, big maybe. But yeah, you do want to recruit an army like this, and then when you can afford it, a second army like this. And yeah, just go up, teleport from location to location. Like, for instance, in this campaign, I took Mingol over here, then I built a cult over here, Numas, wiped out Khemri, and then now I'm going to send a cultist to the north to teleport to, say, Barak Var. You can do this in friendly, you can set up cults in friendly territory, by the way. It's like, it's not a limitation on like, oh, you set up, you vassalize a faction. No, you can teleport across your entire, like, this is one of the reasons you want to engage in diplomacy with Khorne. You can't set up a cult on your territory, but you can set up a cult on allies and just play defense if you want to. There's so many possibilities. This is the great thing about Khorne. It's not just about like, oh, I'm gonna go smash, burn, kill, maim, right? Which is what people might think about. No, you actually have a great deal of strategic viability in a Khorne campaign, far more so than you might think because of all this teleportation. Sure, it might feel like ping-ponging to a certain extent, but it does end up working well. There's a trouble spot, just teleport Skarbrand. He'll deal with it very quickly. Also, I gotta say, Skarbrand himself is really capable of defeating most threats on his own. The army's just there to not force you to fight every battle manually, though I think he could possibly auto-resolve every battle. No, he could win the vast majority of battles in a campaign on his own. Especially when you give him replenishment in combat, but even before that, he's pretty damn ridiculous. But this is not a video about Skarbrand, like, all of them are very strong legendary lords. Like, yeah, their special skill line is worth it. One of the things I would say about skill lines, though, if you're playing Skarbrand or Skulltaker, you kind of want to focus on their melee skill line, like get Root Marcher, get Inspiring Presence. That's generally my strategy. Like, getting 5% campaign movement range and experience per turn, always worth it. But get the melee skill line a bit, like just 2 points over here, and then save up for the special skill line at a higher level to get it all at once. You don't need anything else in the skill tree. Then you can focus on the army tree, specifically the Blood-Soaked Champions. You don't really want to benefit your Bloodletters, because I think using Bloodletters is just not worth it. Playing Creative Assembly's auto-resolve shenanigans on that subject. Like, beyond the early game, even as Skulltaker or Skarbrand, it's not really worth using Bloodletters. Unless you really want to fight every single battle manually, well, good on you, I suppose, on that subject. So with all of that said, we come back full circle to where I started this video off, about to face Belegar over here. How you decide to play Khorne is up to you. You can just burn the world to the ground. You can decide to just go one way, never teleport. You can build cults all around the world if you so decide. This is, by the way, how Cult Magi cult looks like Cult Magi chambers. It's not especially worth it, like a bit of income gained from local settlement. If Khorne Corruption is higher, it gives you hero and lower recruit rank. If you build a lot of these, sure. But it's kind of not worth the effort and the cost, by the way, the amount of time as well. It's also costly, like 3,000 gold for it. Kind of not worth it, I think, especially when a cult is destroyed if you want to teleport over there, so you are sacrificing to do it. Like, I did it here, but I don't necessarily think it's worth it. But that's up to you. If you want to build cults around the world, that's your choice. Hell, you could always use those to teleport much later on in a campaign if you want to go for it. That's your prerogative. In terms of what your end goal is, well, whatever the hell you want it to be, basically. There's a good amount of climate viability, and climate doesn't really matter. Khorne is one of those few factions in the game that doesn't necessarily care about holding vast arrays of territory. I would say, like, you can beat any Khorne campaign with just 2 provinces, 1 mortal, 1 demonic. And that's just literally the provincial capitals. For the different types of unit recruitment, because varying your unit recruitment is fun. One of the reasons I really disliked Khorne before the rework, I acknowledged that it could be strong, but it was just like building a bunch of Chaos Warriors of Khorne and even Marauders or Marauder Horsemen and just dominating the map. That was pretty crap, as far as I saw it in terms of campaign variety, not really replayable. But now, between the diplomatic capabilities, as well as unit recruitment, you have a lot more variety to go for. But what should you use in terms of variety? Well, in terms of lords, I would say like Blood Speakers or Cast Lords are always going to be better than Heralds of Khorne. You can get Bloodthirster Lords, but they're demons. They're not going to be especially the best in the world. They're not going to compare to Blood Speakers as far as I see. You can get these guys, and then you can trade them away for, you know, a Bloodthirster Lord if you want to. Personally, yeah, this is where Omens of Destruction and Champions of Chaos come into play. Because you look at the Blood Speaker. Maybe not as good in combat, to be sure, but you look at this. Upkeep for Skull Reapers and Wrathmongers, campaign movement range, post-battle loot, gruesome display, causes fear, as well as various other benefits that are pretty useful, including summoning a unit of Bloodletters in battle. Hero-wise, well, Blood Reapers are literally just there for the campaign movement range. Although, they can also offer some very useful buffs as well in battle. One of the things to keep in mind with Khorne, though, when you are fighting battles, you can get a good amount of melee attack through the army ability that Khorne can get. So just keep in mind, there's a bunch of army abilities you can have access to in a Khorne campaign, like Hunger and Blades, all that kind of stuff, right? Just as an example, like an augment like that. But you can get like melee attack for a bunch of units. So in terms of like Blood Reapers, you do get a melee skill line, pretty pretty clear. I would go for melee attack. I would go for melee defense, and actually I made a mistake over here going main, because you want physical resistance and you want melee defense. You want to increase survivability of heroes first, then worry about their damage. But then you get two choices at different levels. One is over here, and another one here. I would probably recommend going for the Hungering Blades, because if you look at Fight or Die, Khorne units have a pretty solid melee, pretty solid amount of freaking melee attack. That is not the problem you're gonna struggle with in a Khorne campaign. That's actually one of the things that makes Khorne so dangerous. It's not that their units are so inherently crazy in terms of the damage they're doing, is that a lot of their freaking units will hit very often, because basically melee attack has chance to hit. That is what's the crazy aspect. Like, consider a Black Orc, right? Let's just go with this. You look at Black Orc 43, you consider a Chosen 56 in the same army. I understand, different skills, but all that, but still, it is that specific aspect that you gotta be aware of. You have a huge amount of melee attack, so going for more of it can be useful. But yeah, I would go with Hungering Blades over here to buff the Blood Reaper himself, though you can always go Fight or Die. I would not necessarily bother with Champions End, just kind of not worth it bothering with assassination actions. You're not a fucking assassin as Khorne, you just go beat the crap out of people. I think Khorne would beat the crap out of you if you used assassination actions. Then you have a Locust, so Abjurations for spell resistance, Locust of Fury for base weapon damage and armor piercing damage, or Locust Wrath for melee attack. This is one of the reasons Fight or Die is redundant, because you can get a Locust of Wrath. I mean, I guess you could go with Fight or Die, but neither of these is necessary. I would go Locust of Fury and Siphon Punch F, or yeah, if you want Fight or Die for whatever reason, you don't care about the Blood Reaper's compatibility, you can go with that. With Cultists of Khorne, beyond, putting the cults up, they do have a bunch of significant benefits in combat in terms of buffing your army. So they have a melee skill line. They can summon Blood Reapers with the Gaze of Khorne ability and various uses. Beyond the fact that you can get an army ability that also does the same thing, they can also summon a Bloodthirster temporarily in battle. That's ridiculous. Then you get the skill between campaign movement range when not embedded, so not when part of an army. Benefits for Demon Reforging. Demons are not worth using. It's certainly not Bloodletters. And the greater demons, yeah, you should not want to get them reforged. You should not want to lose them in battle, period. Because do you want to risk that? And this is one of the reasons why focusing on melee attack for Blood Reapers is not worth it. Because you can get killed for Khorne ability over here. And also get 15% unit experience for the entire army. That's worth it. Then, you can either get character experience per turn 200 for accompanying Lord. That can be really useful. Rage for Marauders of Khorne, Marauder Horsemen of Khorne, as well as armor for Marauders, Skull Reapers, and Wrathmongers. Or you can go for Aspirant, which gives you Killing Blow, a benefit to Deadly Onslaught, and character experience. This is a bit of a different choice. It depends on what do you want. Like, I think Skull Reapers and Wrathmongers are pretty solid enough with their baseline armor that you may not necessarily need it. I mean, they're pretty ridiculous with their with the amount of armor you can get very, very quickly with them. Rage, however, can be useful if you're using Marauders. I don't necessarily think it's worth it. I would personally go with Killing Blow. Like, Cultists, you should not be a frontline unit, to be clear. And Rage can be useful, but yeah, I would either go with the character experience or the Lord experience over here. But you do have a choice. Then you have the Exalted Hero of Khorne. Now, for Warriors of Chaos, this is kind of like your replenishment hero because you get Chaos Strategist. But for Khorne, as a race, this is the different one. Like, obviously, they have a melee skill line. Nothing worth saying more on that subject, but you also get a Juggernaut mount. But then you have either armor pierce melee attack bonus versus infantry, or casualty replenishment. Not worth getting with that. You have plenty of casualty replenishment. You'll get plenty of experience so through regular training. So you can get standard die, so melee defense, especially if you're using demonic units. But regardless, any units, just make Khorne units which are crazy tanky enough in melee, even worse than that. And then you either get the Hellblade skill, the Raging Stalwart, or Khorne Corruption. Screw the Khorne Corruption, go for Raging Stalwart every single time. 10% spell resistance is very damn significant. Like, Khorne has a good amount of spell resistance by default, so you might think, I don't need it, but I don't necessarily think Hellblade is worth it, especially when you do need a good amount of kills. Then you have, of course, like the legendary heroes. To unlock these legendary heroes, you do need to basically get the Skull Reaper recruitment building to get Scarlet Wrath. For Skilla, for the Hounded Skilla, it's kind of annoying because you do need to raid, and you kind of don't want to raid as Khorne because you may not have the movement range for it. So in camp stance is very easy to set up. Raiding stance does require 50 campaign movement range. That sucks quite a bit. You might just set up a lord in a neutral province just to raid to get Skilla quickly enough. It will stack up even when you don't have Skilla unlocked, I think. So you might want to do that. Funnily enough, by the way, the hardest battle in Scarbrand's campaign is quest battle, so I'd probably get the higher end army. You don't need the chainsword. Scarbrand does not need items, does not need a weapon. He is a weapon. It's all about collision damage with him. But yeah, as for lords, as I said, Bloodspeaker, unit-wise, here's what I'd focus on. I would obviously focus on the arsenal, so get Cast Warriors of Khorne with dual weapons, maybe a Cast Shrine if you want, Cultists, a couple of Cast Warriors of Khorne with halberds, just deal with, flank protection and all that. And then I would, so that would be tier 1 to tier 3. Then I would also get like the Exalted Hero recruitment building. You can get rid of this early on to get more growth through the War Amphitheater. And then you can get that tier 3 Cast Knights of Khorne. Though I probably make an argument that they're not worth it until you can get Cast Knights of Khorne with lances. Kind of shitty that they're different tiers, but hey, that's just the situation. If you're playing Arbol, by the way, there's a strong argument to be made towards taking Zarnagrim very early on just to get Cast Knights of Khorne with lances. And then yes, the Khorne Tribute that gives you Chosen and Skull Reapers at tier 3. Chosen, you might think they're an expensive unit, but you get so much upkeep and you'll get so much money from battles. Like, funnily enough, like, except like a couple of turns in the early game or when I'm building a province significantly, I don't really feel the lack of money in a Khorne campaign. Even though you literally have no economic buildings, which is a bit bizarre. But yeah, you want Skull Reapers and you want Wrathmongers. Funnily enough, I think Wrathmongers right now are ridiculously good as a unit in a campaign. Like, the multiplayer communities complain like they're too strong. But Wrathmongers or Chosen of Khorne with dual weapons, it doesn't matter. Both are ridiculously strong. Of course, DLC, keep that aspect in mind. If you don't own DLC, you'll get pretty far away with just Cast Warriors of Khorne with dual weapons and Cast Warriors of Khorne with shields, but that's the reason you want the DLC. Or you can get the Beast, the Domains of Slaughter, and get Minotaurs of Khorne with great weapons and the regular ones. Although, do you need that building? See, this is where things get a bit tricky. Beyond that, in terms of other buildings, there's resource buildings, and there's, of course, the trophy chamber. You do need to get to tier 4 to unlock the Hound of Khorne. That is an annoying factor, by the way. I do dislike how some of these legendary heroes are unlocked, but yeah, you want that Hound of Khorne, you're going to need to get that trophy hall. So you're going to need to get this element to tier 4. Kind of shit, not going to lie, but it is how this system works in the game. But then there's resource buildings. And resource buildings, they're a bit interesting. Most of the things that they give are certain benefits, right? Like, for instance, Iron gives you recruitment cost for all your mortal units, recruit rank, and armor to all your armies. That is pretty damn good, right? Undeniably so. Something like Obsidian gives you spell resistance. I'm not going to go over all of them. Just suffice to say, they're pretty good. One of the more useful ones is gems, because they give you all the hero recruitment options for every hero. They don't increase capacity, but early on in a campaign, if you can get gems, so maybe you do want to go after Quigat playing a Scarbrand, just getting one of these and getting all 3 hero types is pretty damn solid. And also, yeah, money, 400 income. It's actually quite a bit in a Khorne campaign, because again, your income is going to be pretty low. That's one of the reasons you want to have vassals, because you rely on a combination of post-battle loot, stacking income, or raising income, and potentially vassalizing vassal income. But here's an interesting little resource: exotic animals. Exotic animals do this following thing: they give you money. They also give a recruit cost for beasts, right? Or anything from the beast chain. They also give you Minotaur recruitment and Slaughter Brew recruitment at tier 3. That is, and basically all the beasts will be available by tier 3. That is crazy. The reason that's crazy, the Slaughter Brute is a tier 5 unit. It's gonna be expensive, but imagine if a resource building in a dwarf campaign could allow you to recruit Thunder Barges at tier 3. Would that be broken? Yes. Slaughter Brutes are not Thunder Barges. They actually are kind of weak compared to what they're supposed to be. So I think like the MP community is saying they should be buffed right now. But yeah, Minotaurs are pretty crazy powerful units, and it's just fun. This is the thing about the Khorne campaign. Variety of armies is great. Diplomatic variety is great. Strategic possibilities are great. There's so much nuance in terms of strategy, in terms of tactics even. Strategy, tactics, diplomacy, map control. That is what makes Khorne so really good. So don't dismiss Khorne as one of the brute factions that just, auto resolve their way to victory. You can. Sure. But it's not about what you can or can't do that I think makes a faction good. There are some people who think like, oh, the game has to be challenging, and inherently what they're saying, it has to be obnoxious. I disagree. I think if you're a good player, like just saying this for veteran players, if you're a veteran player who spent thousands of hours, the game should not be challenging for you, really. Like, it should not be breaking our balls every time. But it is what it has on offer in terms of variety and replayability that counts. Unit variety is important. Terrain variety is important. Choices in a campaign are important. So keep those kind of things in mind, and I think that is one of the reasons Khorne is one of the best races to play right now in the game. Not necessarily the best campaigns. I think Malachi does have the best campaign, but I'm not gonna lie. I think Gabriel is certainly giving him a very, very strong run for his money in a lot of ways. Kostin signing out, and stay tuned for more.